introduction. Welcome to London Bobbler. Bobbler is the Swedish word for bubble. So we've adopted that for the 3 months that we're here while our building is being made accessible and green down the road. If you've never been there, do come and visit us there, please. There's going to be 3 conversations, and they're linked to 3 attempts to archive the sprawling beast, which is the London Bubble's adventure in participation circa 1984 thus far, and other companies who have carried on the work elsewhere. And with the 3 conversations, the first one is the Theatre of Children, although Shipper, what's the title now? Theatre of the Young, I think it's changed to. And that's also archived in a thing in the middle of the office here. And then later on we're going to be looking at the Youth Step Up, which is around teenage young adult work. And then we're finishing off this evening with what we're calling Theatre of the Community. And that's linked to an archive upstairs. But of course all of these areas completely overlap. You know, the forum sprawls across all 3 strands. And it's been a nightmare to archive and to put panels together and to think about how we're going to approach it. So you've got to help us. And you can help us in 2 ways. First of all, let's make this as interactive and discursive as we can. And secondly, if you wander around the archive, you recognise something that you know that we haven't annotated correctly, somebody that you recognise, something that's wrongly labelled, please take a pencil and correct things. We're trying to gather the information digitally on the Bubblepedia, which is linked to our website, and what's the opposite of digital? Analogy in hard copy. I'll shut up. Welcome these 3, heavens above. So there's sort of 3 areas of the bubble here, and Alison, who's very, very brave. Alison is only just starting her bubble adventure, but she's come on as an advisor to the Speech Bubbles project, which we're on at the moment. And she's a teacher, works for the Qualifications Curriculum Council, and is sort of the person who's going to ask the questions that we want to ask. And over there is Trish. I've asked them what their dates, and nobody can remember. Trish worked with the Bubble from 1994 as a freelancer, then joined us full-time in 1999 through 2002. And then she sort of handed over to the next vintage, 2001 to 2007, Sonia Hyams. Maybe that's the name of that. So it's a very close thing. And then she was taken over by the present vintage, the Beaujolais Nouveau, which is Adam Annand. And we're going to start each session with a little film. And the problems with the film straight away is that, of course, they go back to when we started filming things. So we actually did work before film was invented. So we have
I'm going to start with that last sentence that we heard there about saying that the difference that it can make through projects like this. Before we start, as Peth said, I do a lot of work with children and young people and teachers and adults. When I was working at QCA, one of the things we did was that we had a conference and we invited primary children from all over the country to tell us what they think should be in the national curriculum. And one of the questions we asked them was what was the best learning they ever did. And time after time, these children who'd never met before from all over the country, drama resonated through everything. So I'm just going to read you 2. This is from a boy called Tom who said, the best learning I ever did was history in year 5 because we got to act things out that happened, like the Battle of Bosworth. But my favourite was an Egyptian myth when I was the god Seth and Luke was Osiris and I got to chop him up behind a wall and throw out fake limbs in front of the school. And I've never ever forgotten that story and I never will. And this is somebody else who said, my best learning was when I acted in front of hundreds of people in a show for my drama class at school. The best bit was at the end when I sang a solo on my own. I think this taught me lots of different things, but most of all it made me feel confident and just generally great at the fact that it was me, actually me, on a stage performing. So I just I thought I'd bring these 2 with me before we start off. So I think if we start here and hear about some of the great projects that you have been involved with young people, but also the impact of that and what difference you felt it made for those children.
Or me.
I do.
I mean, actually, I think for me, one of the biggest programs that I was involved in had to be the helicopter technique, and it's something that I'm still working on and really passionate about. And for me, that started with quite early into being asked to come and work at the Bubble full-time, because I'd been a freelancer for a long time. But actually, Peth handing me a book, The Boy Who Would Be a Helicopter, and it totally changed my life. And actually, in terms of learning, for me, the learning had to be more about my learning than anything else, because what really happened was I learned about listening to children and taking the time to really listen and really hear what children were saying, and using that as part of my practice and I mean, it's shaped the work that I do completely from that moment on. So, and because for me it's about not leading, it's about a total rethinking of a whole practice, and a connection with Vivian Gussin-Paley and the work that she does, which for me is just that day that Peth handed me the book. And it's really funny, you get photos in your brain. Even though we weren't digital, I have a photo in my brain of Peth going, can you work that up into a project? And actually, it was the gold that I was given. So, other things, I mean, God, there were so many. We did forum theatre programmes with young people. We did the police project. I loved doing the police project, going out with a group of young people in police cars to actually find out what the police's job was like, and being raced around. Sort of 19... Yeah, being intentionally with young people, but for all of us was a huge eye-opener, and actually having those opportunities to go and really research with a group of young people all the different sides of what was happening, with the police, with victim support, with young offenders, and actually using that to incorporate into a programme was a massive piece of learning. God, I mean, even down to an amazing, wonderful programme that we did at the Lyric really early on, where, not the Lyric, I can't think, Peth. Where was it we did the Father Christmas thing? It was Kew Gardens, that was it. Sorry, my brain went down. At Kew Gardens, we had this amazing Father Christmas story that I think it happened every year, and then I think they stopped the funding for some reason. But I remember being involved in one of the programmes and just creating a whole environment where children could go through and be engaged in a story and have a story, and then at the end be Father Christmas. So masses of programs.
In terms of your learning and their
in terms of, and I think it is two ways. I mean, for me, I feel like I'm so much more aware of my own learning at that time, of actually taking the chance to learn how to direct working with young people, to learn how to listen. There was so much, but for me it feels that's how I'm actually seeing it much more, was it really felt like it's the bedrock of my practice and where I've gone, more so than a reflection on what they got out of it.
A lot of my work was with the sort of key stage 2, the kind of 7 to 11 year age group, and probably that kind of came about because I was a qualified teacher, and at the end of my kind of teacher training I thought to myself, I still really want to work with young people, but I really don't want to work full time in one school. But what I did want to do was I wanted to work with teachers, and I wanted to work with young people in that school environment and help to bring that kind of creativity and freedom within the constraints of the national curriculum, and look at its opportunities as well as its challenges. So that's really how kind of creative literacy came about. It was felt at the time a bit of a sort of golden age of funding, really, because that was the time when creative partnerships began and was growing, and was really giving arts organisations and schools an opportunity to work together to create a project that was both a need for the school as well as something that the arts organisation felt that they could really bring, an added value to. And so we worked really, I think it might have been over kind of 2 or 3 years with Crampton Primary, which is based in Southwark, and I was there kind of 1-2 days a week, working with all the classes, but critically with the teachers. So actually over the course of a half term we'd pick a story that they'd be working on in their literacy hour, and we would, for the first 2 or 3 sessions, I would deliver workshops, but workshops that absolutely were transparent. They were kind of written down and the teacher had them too. And then the middle set, it was me and the teacher team teaching them. And then for the third part, it was the teacher leading with me, supporting the teacher, so that when we left, the teacher could continue this work. That was what the legacy was the really important part of that particular project. And there was time, you know, budgeted time, so that actually teachers could have time out of class to plan with you, and all those things that were really kind of difficult before and after were kind of made much easier then. And working with London Bubble was always one of those kind of great things, in that you could be in a creative literacy session, but then I could also say, so, teachers, if you want to do more of this, we've got sessions at London Bubble, adult sessions, or you can bring your own children and do some stuff, and young people, if you want to do some more stuff, we've got some stuff that and we actually had massive kind of intake of participants who'd taken part first time in schools. That's where they'd come across us first, and now they were also entering into kind of, you know, the Bubble community as well, and also just being on the ground, you know, the importance of being on the ground and listening to kind of what was happening in the staff room, and those kind of snatch conversations you have with teachers at the end of sessions. And that's also how the Jumping the Gap, the transition projects came about, because certainly in Southwark there was a particular issue whereby one primary school of children of 30 actually could go to kind of up to 16 different schools, so they were not staying together, they were kind of being pulled apart. So as well as this big jump into secondary school, they weren't even kind of with their mates. And teachers were saying it's difficult, and something's happening in that sort of first year of secondary school. So trying to get secondary school children and primary school children working together to kind of try and allay their fears, but also do it in a creative and exciting way, so that we could kind of, that they could learn more through each other.
Great, thank you. Up to date now, Adam?
Up to date. So something that Marie said to me, Marie, who looks after our teenage work, was looking back over that archive was really interesting, because we don't feel like we're particularly doing anything new at the moment. And looking over the archive was really interesting. We feel like we're doing the stuff that's been going on for quite a while. I have always seen myself as a theatre maker, and working in education has always been the place where I've made theatre. But is being a theatre maker, and first and foremost for me, a devising actor, has been the thing that has led that. And the thing, I suppose, the reason why I wanted to come to the Bubble in 2008, despite, you know, a conversation we could probably hear a lot today, difficult funding times, was because I always had the sense with the Bubble that the theatre came first, and making theatre came first. And the project that I've kind of most been involved with in my time and tried to keep going is what is now called Speech Bubbles. But it comes from a project which certainly comes from Trish's time, and certainly comes from Sonia's time, which was, you were doing the Speak Out project. So Speak Out was using lots of the theatre form that Bubble had worked on, and when Trish talks about the Paley work, it's just making theatre with children. It's just getting stories and acting them out, and using the energy of theatre. And it's a really quick way of making theatre, but it does all the things that theatre does. And it builds on the connection between the people doing the acting and the people doing the watching. And it builds on the connection for young children with play. And the great thing about the Speech Bubbles project was it comes through this history here, and it's completely embedded in all the work of the company. And Sonia had been doing this piece of work, which was an Arts Council research project with Lewisham speech and language therapists, looking at the fact that we have this growing need in our schools of young people coming into schools without the communication skills that mean that they can access the curriculum. And Sonia and the team that have been working on that have used lots of the work that comes through the Paley work, and we're using those techniques. And what we did with Speech Bubbles is, because that money came to an end, and it's, you know, this ridiculous situation we arrive in, which is a beautiful project with fantastic research evidence, and you know, and it just finishes despite, you know, we're always told, you know, get evidence, you know, be evidence-based, and we put the evidence there, and the project runs out of money anyway. That's deeply frustrating. I don't care about doing anything new anymore, because every time we do the work with the children, it's new to them, and that's what's important. That in the moment we're making new theatre with them. So we set the Speech Bubbles project up. And the other thing about Speech Bubbles is, we're now in a situation where we're working with children who are referred, who we're not working with whole classes. And that's a bit of a frustration for me, because what we're doing would benefit the whole class. But for the children we are working with, weekly, they're making a bit of theatre with each other, and they're playing, and they're enjoying it, and they are developing their language, and they're developing their physical communication, and they are developing their empathy and their relationships, and they're making new friends, and they're finding things inside themselves which make them a fuller human being. And quite often these are children who are being told on a daily basis that they're not of the same value as other people. Their social situation, their relationships in the school might tell them that. And then this moment where they tell each other, in those theatre-making moments, that they are of value and they are important, and the things they've got to say are of value, and that makes them a full person. And so it's great being at the Bubble, because this is a place that understands that and just then talks about the theatre. So I went this week into a session in a school where for children with quite extreme behavioural challenges, where we're down to running the session for 2 children at a time, because that's what we can manage in the room. And what was, coming back to Trish's point about what we learn and what we're doing, I just like acting, is the truth. I just like making theatre. So there was this moment where, there was a lot of kind of negative emotion in the room, and we're asking them to help make a story together. So we made this story with these children, they're year 5, and they made this story about going into a museum and stealing a ruby, and it was a shapeshifter, and he could keep going in and coming out, and every time he went out he could change, because he got kicked out of the museum. He went out and he could be someone else, and he could go back in. And anyway, so he's going, oh yeah, of course, that's what it's like, isn't it? As if, he says, yeah, he's a troublemaker, isn't he? And, oh. So we start to act this out, and I get to play the museum guard. And the kid comes in and he's going, hardly bothering to act. So when I came to the museum guard, and I went, oi, get out of the room! What are you doing nicking that stuff? And he just went from this, and he just went, and this big smile came on his face. And he went, all right then. And he went out, and no rehearsal, he just kind of changed and came back in again, following through the whole shapeshifter thing. And I just went, oh, right, I'm going to look at the exhibits, because clearly I didn't know who he was. And it's just like, so, in truth, why am I doing it? Well, because I get to do some of that acting. I used to do that as an actor teacher working for a theatre and education company. There was a team of us, and I'd get paid to do that in the rehearsal room for 6 weeks before taking a play to young people. Well, there's very little of that around anymore, so now I just go and do the same thing. But sometimes they're 5, and sometimes they're 7, sometimes they're 8, and, they're beautiful people to devise theatre with. So actually, probably, like Trish says, all the impact on communication and stuff is just, it's just an excuse for me to still do what I like, which is just devising theatre and making it up.
So I'm going to stop you for a second.
Yeah, please do.
And say, it's obviously very important for you, Adam.
It is, yeah, it's important for me, yeah.
Can I also ask the panel what they think, why is it important for all young people to be involved in drama? What do you think they get out of it? In terms of, we talked a little bit about self-esteem, communication skills, again, especially for young children who are coming from a background where that is something that they really need to develop in order to access education. But what else do you think? Why is it important for young people to have an access to drama?
I mean, for me, I think it's about story, actually. And for me, my real passion is story more so than drama. I kind of think drama's a tool that I use, along with loads of other tools. But actually, for me, it's about finding the story, finding the way through it. And our brains are hardwired from birth to make sense of the world through story. There's a lot of evidence that there's that hardwiring happening. And actually for me, so that's what play is about. Fantasy play is children having that opportunity. We have this tool that children are born with, which is story. And story gets acted through play. If we do not allow that to carry on, then we're just shutting the tool that is actually the tool we have to make sense of the world outside of the classroom. So for me, it's not even that it's a good thing to do, it's actually that it's the skill that we have to explore, and it's about looking at problems, it's about, whether we want to look at history, whether we want to look at mathematics, whether we want to look at science. Actually what we do is if we tap into the tool that is storytelling, and through that, the tool that is play, which is what all theatre is play, then we're actually in a position to engage people. And, so for me, it's almost like it's folly to shut outside. You wouldn't go, oh, that's the skill you've got, but you're allowed to use it, do that in your own time. And that's what happens in terms of drama.
Yeah, it's absolutely about young people, all kinds of people, everyone who kind of, about making sense of the world, being able to kind of reflect back, and learn. And for me also, it's about those, those reports that have been produced, excellence and enjoyment, kind of things that we knew as arts practitioners forever, was that actually if young people enjoyed themselves, they would learn, and not only would they learn, they'd learn better and they would achieve more. And now there's, as Adam was saying, there's now evidence of this. And so for me, it is a fantastic way for young people, particularly those young people who might not learn best through the kind of chalk and talk method, for them to absolutely become the best human beings they can be before they enter into this very complicated, confusing world.
I've forgotten the question.
What do young people get out of being involved in drama, and why should it be an entitlement, I would argue, for all children to have access to some sort of drama?
I think I'm with Trish. We can talk about it within the education system, and then there's just kind of the other theatre making that we do with young people. So we run groups here, and Tamsin's here, who's this morning was running a group with 6 to 8 year olds, and that's young people choosing to come here to do that. And that should be on offer. That should be on offer to everybody. It's great. It didn't come to me at that age, but later on, youth theatre was probably one of my survival mechanisms for life. It was when everything else was rubbish. That was somewhere I could go and do something different. So those opportunities, I really want to be available to young people, and at whatever age they can do it. And the stuff I'm just completely with Trish. If we don't use theatre and drama in the education system, we're just kind of chucking away a whole massive resource we could have. And predominantly, if we do it right, if we're providing a theatre which is kind of right for those children, often it will engage them. And at a time when they're going through a very prescriptive curriculum, and it's just about to get more prescriptive, those moments of engagement where they feel like they're doing it because they want to, because it makes sense, because it's integrated into their selves, rather than something that are overlaid on them, it would be a shame to miss those moments out. There's a speech bubble story about a girl who came along because I think the school referred her to it because her voice was very rarely heard in the classroom. She did a year of it, and I was walking through the playground to run the session with the next year's group, because they come to that programme for a year. And she called me in the playground and she said, Madam, I've sorted it. I'm going to pretend to be shy again, and then you'll let me come back to speak. and here's the thing, there's loads and loads of anecdotes about children trying to break into speech bubbles. And hiding friends in the queue, and so sitting there in sessions, going, because we run small group sessions, 10 children, and there were 11 children in the room. And I go, oh, no. And I start, get 5 minutes in and go, I don't know you. And I've done 20 sessions, so how do I know? And I realise that they've snuck a friend in. Now, if the children are breaking into the education, let's do it. Let's do it that way.
So the question is, did you send them away, or were they allowed to join in?
They stayed. But they were only allowed to stay for that session. Because I couldn't get it out of my control. But yeah, they stayed for that session. The other thing is, we have got such a wonderful history of drama and education techniques. We're talking, there's my background is theatre and education, but the longer history of drama education this is the leading country for that work. We've got all the work that all the enroll work, that history of that work, all the experiential drama, the wonderful work of the forum theatre stuff, all the play what you say stuff that's come. And we, as the drama practitioners, have all those techniques at our disposal now. And we don't have to be a forum theatre practitioner or a headcount practitioner or any of these things. We got them all. And we're amazing resources for engaging people, engaging their minds and their hearts and their bellies.
And I say interesting, I've just been doing some work in China, which is exactly that they want to encourage their children in school to be much more creative. So drama is one of the tools that they're now using much more in schools in China. Okay, opening up to the audience. Anything that anyone would like to ask, join in, contribute, please do. So, questions?
The young people don't just gain a lot in their confidence. They get to actually know and trust adults.
Absolutely.
We work in community theatre where we live locally in Ealing, and it's a lovely group because you get youngsters, really, really young, right through to my age, even older, 90-year-olds. We work as a unit, and they get to know and trust us, whereas they can't always do that outside.
And I couldn't agree more. Having come to see the Blackbirds,
Yes.
it was just amazing in terms of what those young people were getting in terms of the historical knowledge and skills, but also more importantly, as you say, working with members of the community and finding out those important stories before they're lost.
We have been running a group which is parents and children together. So we will talk later on today about the theatre of the community and that big intergenerational work. But we've been trialling some work which is parents and children coming and doing small group drama together. And out there's a booklet of stories that were gathered from parents and children coming to the drama together. And it's a really interesting first moment when we do that work, which is the parents bring their children and they go, right, okay. Okay. And then we go, no, actually this is for both of you. Or all four of you, however many of the family turn up. We're all going to do it together. And we start to build a culture of just making theatre together and telling stories to each other and acting out each other's stories. And just some of the change in relationship we've seen from the parent and the child, and how they have a moment which breaks down some of the kind of standard power structures that of course exist there, and having moments where that can be challenged and broken down and remade have been just beautiful. So we've seen that in very specific ways as well.
Yes, just comment to Francis that is the classic structure-breaking mode, isn't it? Because that's what happens when you go into any group, there's a power imbalance, and you ask everybody to join in. You break up the power structures and open everything up. I've seen done it with mental health service users and managers where the shock, the manager's experience when they have to work with the people they normally look down on. The wreckage of that ideology for at least an hour and a half. Of course, it reconstitutes itself. That's the classic spectator performer model that being broken. The expectation of being able to sit back and hold power is removed. So it goes right through our working drama.
But it's also those, I mean, that we, sort of, I think all of us who've ever worked in, with any group of young people or any group, and, particularly working in schools, and the teacher goes, that child, I never would have expected that from them. And it's almost like, it's that word where you're just, what this allows to happen is to shine a light on a child in a different way and see another possibility from them. And I think for me that's something that, sort of is another part of that by being in this, they might be quiet in class, or they might not be the kid that you think is going to come forward, or they might not be demonstrating all of their creative ideas, but suddenly, through this act of theatre, we enable them to take a stand in a very different way.
And to break out of the labels
that
they may have had put on for whatever reason.
Yeah, and you're talking about kind of broken down the structures of family, which is very important, playing and experimenting. It's a word that comes up so much in my practice at Immediate is that people talk about we are a family. And I think the process of making theatre enables people to feel part of a kind of a pretend family, but that is deeply important. because you're working as a team, but it's not just a team, it's like it's a family. And I was at a conference with No Offence last week where we were doing a workshop about our work within the context of working with young offenders, and there were some phenomenal speeches given by people about how they kind of overcome various issues and come through offending. And the number of people that said, oh, that was my drama group, so I didn't go that night. And it was my drama teacher. And I just thought, is anybody collecting the fact that these people who overcome, they did drama. And they felt connected and linked and part of a family of people that made something together. And so I think, our kind of role, the kind of family volume, I can't remember that word, of making theatre is really important.
There's something, I wrote a blog on the Guardian website for teachers about speech problems, and one thing I want to know is talk about teachers about how effective I perceive the programme to be, and the evidence we've got, is that we work with 10 children at a time. And teachers are working 25 or 30. And I will push and stick with trying to work in an environment which is numbers are like that. Where they're quite small, where doing something like making that drama together, if you've got 30 people in the room, it's really hard for that age, it's really hard to build that sense of family. There are ways of doing it, and it happens here when we're doing really big generation projects. We build family with big groups. But for young children, it's around about 10, and then we work with them through a year. I think 45 minutes a week, that's all it is, but for a year, they do build a sense of being a group and a family who tell each other stories and act out each other's stories. And it is something to do with actually just sticking with my guns and going, no, we're going to work with small numbers in that setting.
But I have to say, I do think we can do with 30, and I have to push for that, because otherwise we will never get it to happen. And although I really agree with what you're saying, that it's great to have smaller numbers, we've done helicopter with 30 children, and actually you can still have that sense of community and that sense of link. It's hard, because obviously, the schools can be about crowd control, and there is that degree of doing that, but actually within those frameworks, and the language and the learning that goes on, because children are learning to work as a team, and they're learning to take, even as simple as taking turns around a stage, or, knowing that they're needing to get control of their physicality when they're getting up to act something out, or, sort of all of those things that fit with the early years foundation stage, to actually how they come together can create that feeling of family, and we can do it with larger numbers. I love the idea of working with 10, but I also go, we have to have, because otherwise we will never get into schools if that's the premise of the work.
London Drama Association, we are very aware of the value of this and know it's happening, of the creativity and the thing that comes from the creativity that you describe. But in terms of teachers in schools, drama goes now. And drama is now not in the curriculum until very late. It's not there in any practical form. Now, there was a very important letter from National Drama Association which outlined this, and we're all aware of it, but I think it's very important that the methodologies, the ways you have of building groups is flagged up in the present context. Increasingly, we are in a position where drama teachers in schools do not know what their position is, but developing what we used to call after-school drama, more accurately called community drama, is vitally important, and it needs to be very clearly signalled. I've then put it on the website, and I looked at it, and what's important about it is it not records the practice of bubble, but links us into methodologies and ways in which teachers or social community workers access it.
We draft programmes of study for English in secondary school as well. Drama is minimal.
Yeah.
And the only mention is to do with scripts, and it's about
Reading notebooks.
Yeah, and the other thing is about how great dramatists make their work effective on stage. There's no mention of any of the other bodies involved. So I mean, these have just come out and look at them now, and there'll be similarly protests and things you can do about that.
We see great, and Trish will say the same, I'm sure, and Sonia will say the same, we see great dramatists every day of the week. Whenever we go in, we see great dramatists. We've got names like, I don't know, Mohammed and Abdul and Tashon and Adam and Murray, and, we see them all the time.
I would just say as well, in terms of the national curriculum, it was originally the national curriculum should be devised as an entitlement for all children. And if that drama disappears, that entitlement for all the children to have access to drama will disappear. And when I have to say that from the teachers I've come across, and particularly the English teachers, there's felt like there's an absolute thirst for that. Those ideas around practical approaches to how I can energise and infuse my pupils. The curriculum feels slowly but surely like it's suffocating. The things that English teachers went in to do because they loved, or they had a great teacher, or they loved reading, or they loved stories and plays. And, it very much feels like more than ever. Maybe it will become that companies such as London Bubble and other companies become even more important for them to support teachers in service training or in schools to be able to actually, if it is using drama as a tool, practical approaches to Shakespeare, whatever it is that's going to actually tick their boxes, but also find a way to make it exciting for both teachers and young people, which I think is vital. So, give us an outback.
Why do we seem to have lost this battle? That's what it sounds like. I mean, for years we've been going, so what?
Not over yet.
Not over yet. But I mean, Adam was talking about lasting evidence. And there's been evidence for years. So why, since any time we go into schools and use kind of that, teachers are always convinced, everybody's always convinced. Yeah. So what is it that is so frightening that governments, and I have a theory about the answer, but I'm interested in what people think, the governments don't embrace it and that we're in danger of virtual extinction by the sound of it?
I think we nearly won the battle, actually. I think it got really close. I got very excited a few years ago before this government. We had Ken Robinson talking about, we need a revolution in education. And, that felt like it was really exciting what he was saying. Then we had the Rose Review. The Rose Review, I don't know if any of you haven't come across it, do look into it. I still think there's stuff available. That would have come online September last year. And that was radical. It was hugely radical. It was about thinking skills. It was actually, they interviewed loads of teachers, and it would have changed the face of education. What we have at the moment, and the part of the battle that is dangerous, is we have an education secretary who thinks that everyone needs to learn through his learning style, and he went to public school and completely enjoyed learning in this very sort of set way. And it isn't a national curriculum that he's proposing. It's actually a curriculum that is about his favourite subjects. That's what it feels like, and how to teach them. But also as part of that, and I'm just hoping that we can get rid of this government and then Labour will get in and go, let's bring the Rose Review and turn it around quickly, because all the stuff's been printed and was ready to go in, and that could have a really major change in terms of how education was. So for me, I kind of feel like it's this government and it's this fear of working in that way that is so reductive. Yes.
I think we have to be a bit braver than that. We have to almost trash the national curriculum at the moment as it's. I'm from Moral from Chickenshire, the Director of Education, and we sort of teach our students that there aren't just three R's, there's a fourth R, which is drama, communication, and what is what is the most important skill for the modern age? It's communication and it's empathy, it's all those types of things. But I think it's a dual approach. We need to look at the national curriculum as it is, and this is the kind of things that we ask our students to do. Look at what is piles and piles of deadwood in all the other curriculum subjects, mathematics, etc., etc. Look at the things that actually people use. I always use the example of my son, coming back late at night from a football match and having to do algebra at the age of 11, quadratic equations, and I had to retake my O-level 5 times to pass my maths O-level. So, and he was back with it, and he sort of slammed his pen down after about 2 hours and said, "When am I going to use this again? Be honest with me." And I said, "When was the last time you used it?" And I said, "It was when I was 11 years old, quadratic equations, and I've not used it since." So, but I think this, as I say, there's a dual approach. We've got to sort of push the fact of drama, performing arts, and all of that creativity as the fourth R. We've got to look at other subject areas. We've got to, as I say, trash the parts of it that are not relevant to people and to our kids. And the other thing is we've got to sort of look at the strength of drama, performing arts as a way into learning in those other subjects. We've got to see the importance of math, drama in maths, see the importance of story in maths, in science, in geography, in history, in all of those places, and almost make a point that drama things to set off schemes of work in primary schools and in secondary schools is a compulsory entitlement that is actually going to help learning in all the subjects, not just. I think the more we try to sort of put in the place of drama, performing arts, we're going to lose the battle. We've got to make it, show how relevant it is to everything, and then push it as the fourth R, creativity, communication, all those things.
Just to come back very briefly, some of the work I do is working with sort of teachers, employers, parents, governors, and one of the things we always ask them to do is to list the sorts of things that they think a really successful learner will look like. And I've got a list whether I've done it in China or I've done it in the UK or children, and it's things like being independent, willing to have a go, generating ideas, showing initiative, curious, all of those skills. And yet in schools we often spend a lot of time teaching the stuff and less about those skills which are exactly what we've been hearing about today through drama and how you can use that, as we say, regardless of whether you're teaching science or maths, but those things are really important for young people before they grow. Yes, I
just following on with connects in that because obviously I feel very strongly about drama in the curriculum, and I went to a conference and got very, very inspirational with Master from Birmingham. And he said, "I don't want drama in the curriculum, I don't want arts in the curriculum, because I want it everywhere." And so I think that, if we lose what we see as being valuable, we should assume we have the course. And actually, I do think that's what I do as well, is that it shouldn't be necessarily a different subject until, key stage 3 or so, because it should be everywhere. Not just
it's not like on a Wednesday afternoon we're doing Panelists. A head teacher recently spoke to me about talking about it like a stick of rock, and that drama and those skills go through everything that they do at school, and I think that's as you say, that's what they're aiming for. We have 5 minutes left, so yes.
I just want to pick up on something that Trish says, and I entirely agree with what you're saying about Michael Gove. There's an interesting thing there in that you're talking about public schools, in that the fee-paying public school sector put a huge emphasis on drama. Eton, I saw a few weeks ago, advertising for a resident director. They have a resident designer at Eton. They have more resident designers in public schools than you do in British theatres. And I did some work at Westminster a few years ago, and they put phenomenal resource into it. They recognise the value, but it's good enough for their kids, but it's a luxury for us.
I just think Michael Gove probably didn't like it.
Yeah.
I wasn't his favourite subject. But it's about creativity, isn't it? It's about how can we get children to develop their creativity that they've got, and that's so that's where for me drama is a tool, and is more so than a subject from it.
Just come back to it, interestingly, the countries that he holds as being very high-performing countries, like Singapore, similarly spend an awful lot of time and effort into subjects like creative arts as being really important. So it's an international